Are charismatic leaders born or made? Classic nature versus nurture kind of material, don't you think? Now, because this is primarily a philosophical question, we're going to take it into a slightly different direction. As you know, leadership-driven project management is all about making sure that you have something actionable that you can take forward. So if you've been enjoying that and the tips or suggestions that we've been given, please subscribe or like or even pass it along maybe. Okay. We do release video lessons on a pretty regular basis. And if you have specific topics you'd like us to cover, please let us know. It might be on the list already, but we can move it up. All right, charismatic leaders. This can be an important point of your personal leadership journey because for many people, it is kind of built in. The assumption that in order for you to be an effective leader, you have to be charismatic. Okay, but it can mean very different things to very different people. And there used to be a time when everybody thought that charismatic leadership was the only kind of leadership and that leaders were born that way. But that's not necessarily the case. If you want to start looking at what makes a leader particularly charismatic, may I suggest something that may be a little bit uncomfortable, unsettling? Don't just study leaders that have had a beneficial effect. There were leaders that have been extremely charismatic in certain times in history. Winston Churchill comes to mind, and he was incredibly charismatic, but outside of the context of World War II, well, you can find a lot of people who have written very strongly about how little they liked that gentleman. So sometimes it's also the context. But limiting your study of charismatic leaders to only those who had beneficial impacts on society and the world in general might be a little short-sighted. So take a look at other leaders. Why do I suggest this? Because I remember in a debating class, somebody making a very strong case that we should look at people like Hitler and Caligula in order to truly understand why people would follow them to begin with. Maybe what we had to understand was the nature of their charismatic leadership. Don't you hate it when somebody does that? Makes such a valid point, and yet it's going to be really uncomfortable to explore it. But truly take a look at exploring it, because your first step in understanding how to grow your level of leadership within a charismatic context is to be able to identify for yourself, what does charisma mean to you? I know Webster's has a definition. Oxford English Dictionary has a definition, but the definition that's going to help you the most, that would be your definition, because that comes out of the context of the teams that you're working in right now, the environment that you're working in right now, and what you are already possibly more comfortable than you might know executing on. So the first thing is to make sure that you have gotten a firm handle on what to you is charisma to begin with. Okay? So establish what you believe charisma is, and then examine your behavior with your teams or just with one-on-one with a colleague over the past week? When did you see evidence of your own behavior in that exact direction? An example. To my way of thinking, part of charisma is to be able to command attention without saying, "Hey, you, pay attention to me." Presence, I believe, is another word for it. If I look at the last week, there have been a couple of times when I confess, hand to heart, no presence, no commanding of attention. As a matter of fact, I had to resort to some really obvious techniques to get the room under control again, because they were so excited about the previous topic that they were just kind of going and going, and I needed them to come back into the room mentally, not just physically, so that we could continue with the schedule. So I started thinking about, well, if presence is one of the things that I think contributes to charisma, that was a time in this entire session that I didn't have it, but what were the times when I did? Oddly enough, I noticed something about those times when I did, and it was this. I wouldn't have, by the way, thought of this. It was a beat of silence. Amazing how that can command attention. So in order for you to actually grow the level of charisma that you exhibit as a leader, perhaps it's a good idea to take a look at what you're already doing that helps. And then, third step, do it in a more conscious, present fashion. Okay, so recap really quickly. Identify what characteristics of charisma resonate within you. Then do a review over the past week and see, did I actually exhibit any of those behaviors? Did I actually exhibit the exact opposite of those behaviors? We're human, right? And then pick one or two, preferably just one at a time. Pick one or two behaviors that you believe demonstrated that you can already do this, and then be more conscious of when the opportunity presents itself to practice it. Remember, leadership-driven project management is about giving you actionable suggestions to be able to grow your leadership capacities. And sometimes there's suggestions that when you hear them, you think to yourself, I knew that. I know, you did. Most of the time you did. 90% of the time, possibly. It's the fact that you have the courage and the commitment to take the time to focus on just this in a time where, let's face it, most of us try a lot harder than we should to multitask. And by the way, did you know neurologists say we can't do that? But you're demonstrating the commitment and you have the courage to take on personal growth in an area that is challenging in so many ways and yet so rewarding. So if you like our approach, please subscribe or like. If you don't like my approach, then please let me know. You can find my email address at the end of this video, and I welcome any opportunity to hear from you. I'm Kimihiro Tsuzimski. This video was brought to you by the Leadership Driven Project Management Academy. Thanks for listening.